Welcome to Older Militarist Radio TV. We're lifelong Catholics, and we do this all for free, and for the love of Jesus Christ, and for our Holy Mother, the Church. We'll defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today we're going to talk about the history of American volunteers. This goes back, to the beginning. The French and Indian War, American Revolution, War of 1812, and so on, all throughout our history. But there are a few areas I want to touch on that you may have never heard of. You all know about the men from Tennessee led by Davy Crockett down to the Alamo. Davy Crockett was a senator from Tennessee. And he decided it's time to leave this old rat house called Washington, D.C. to get back home to Tennessee. And he heard about Texas and the possibilities there. So he and his men packed up everything they had and left their beloved Tennessee to come out west to San Antonio de Bar, Texas. There they joined voluntarily with other men that are Texicans to defend San Antonio from Santa Anna and his men. It's portrayed in the movie The Alamo with John Wayne. Then in the remake, The Alamo with Dennis Quaid and Billy Bob Thornton. Then let's move on to just a little bit down the road to World War One. Before America ever decided to enter that conflict. There were Americans who were not even pilots or members of the military. In the movie theaters across the country, those theaters played advertisements for the country of France on a new volunteer division of an Air Force to fly for France to defend her against the enemy of Germany and all those other. In that division called Lafayette Escadrille. Was the name of the French Air Force unit Escadrille in 124 during the First World War from 1914 to 1918. The Escadrille was composed largely of American volunteer pilots flying fighters. It was named in the honor of Marquis de Lafayette, the French hero of the American Revolutionary War. In September of 1917, the Escadrille was transferred to the U.S. Army under designation 103rd Aero Squadron. In 1921, the French Air Force recreated the N-124 unit who claimed lineage from the wartime Lafayette Escadrille. It is now part of the Escadron 2/4 Lafayette. Dr. Edmund L. Gross, a founder of the American Hospital of Paris, organizer of the American Ambulance Field Service, and Norman Prince, a Harvard-educated lawyer and American expatriate already flying for France, led attempts to persuade the French government of the value of volunteer American air units fighting for France. The aim was to have their efforts recognized by the American public, and thus, it was hoped, resulting public would rouse interest in abandoning neutrality and joining the fight. Authorized by the French Air Department on March 21st, 1916, Escadrille des Chasse Newport 124 was deployed on April 20th in Villeurbanne, France, near Switzerland's border. Despite the unit's weak military status in the United States, this escadrille proved useful for the French and Americans. Taking into consideration that before the First World War, aircraft was not considered combat units. Initially, there were 7 American pilots: Victor E. Chapman, Elliott C. Cowden, Bert Hall, James Roger McConnell, Norman Prince, Keith Rockwell, William Thaw II. The full roster included 38 pilots. Unit's aircraft mechanics uniforms were French, as was the commander, Captain Georges Thénault. 5 French pilots were also on the roster, serving out at various times in command positions. Raoul Ray, a French-born American citizen, earned the squadron's first and ultimately their highest-scoring flying ace, with 16 confirmed victories. Two unofficial members of the Escadrille Americaine Lion Cubs, named Whiskey and Soda, provided countless moments of relief from battle stress to flyers. A German objection filed with the U.S. government over the actions of supposed neutral nation led to the name change Lafayette Escadrille in December 1916. The original name implied that the U.S. was allied to France rather than neutral. The Escadrille was disbanded on February 18, 1918. The American personnel transferred to the United States Army Air Force Service as the 103rd Aerial Squadron, while the French formed Escadrille SPA 124 Jean d'Arc. A total of 224 Americans served in the unit. Of those, 51 died in combat, while another 11 died of other causes. 15 became prisoners of war. 11 pilots became aces. Not all American pilots were in the Lafayette Escadrille. Over 200 fought for France as part of the Lafayette Flying Corps. On April 3, 1918, 11 American pilots from the Air Service of American Expeditionary Forces were assigned to Escadrille in Fort 71, an air defense squadron stationed near Paris. American flyers served with this French unit until 18 July 1918. It is sometimes referred to as the Second Escadrille Americaine. Later, the Escadron des Chasse to 4th Lafayette retook the unit designation of Lafayette, this time, however, in the French Air Force. The first major action seen by the squadron was May 13, 1916, at the Battle of Verdun. 5 days later, Giffen Rockwell recorded the unit's first aerial victory. On 23 June, the Escadrille suffered its first fatality when Victor Chapman was shot down over Douaumont. The unit was posted to the front until September 1916, when the unit was moved back to Lexington and 7th Army area. On 23rd September, Rockwell was killed when his Newport was downed by the gunner and German Albatross observation plane. In October, Norman Prince was fatally injured after crashing on final approach to his airfield. The squadron flying Newport later SPAD scouts suffered heavy losses, but received replacements until a total of 38 American pilots eventually served with the squadron. So many Americans volunteered to fly for France that they were eventually farmed out to other French squadrons. As a group, the Americans who flew in the war for France Air Service, the Aérodynamique Militaire, are collectively known as Lafayette Flying Corps. Altogether, 265 American volunteers served in the corps. And you can learn about, you can see what they do in the movie with, let's see here, James Franco, Martin Henderson, Jean Reno, Jennifer Decker, David Ellison, Abdul Salis, Philip Winchester, and Tyler Leben in the movie Flyboys. Next one, we move into World War II at the start of it. And that unit is called the Flying Tigers. The first American voluntary group, AVG of the Republic of China Air Force, nicknamed the Flying Tigers, was formed to help oppose the Japanese invasion of China. Operating in 1941 to 1942, it was composed of pilots from the United States Army Air Corps, USAAC, Navy, in the Navy, and the Marine Corps. It was commanded by Claire Lee Chanot. The Curtiss P-40B Warhawk aircraft marked with the Chinese colors flew under American control. Recruited under President Franklin Roosevelt's authority before Pearl Harbor, their mission was to bomb Japan and defend the Republic of China, but many delays meant the AVG first flew in combat after the U.S. and Japan declared war. The group consisted of 3 fighter squadrons of around 30 aircraft each that trained in Burma before the American entry into World War II to defend the Republic of China against Japanese forces. The AVG were officially members of the Republic of China Air Force. The group had contracts with salaries ranging from $250 a month for a mechanic or $750 for a squadron commander, roughly 3 times what they had been making in the U.S. forces. While it accepted some civilian volunteers for its headquarters and ground crew, the AVG recruited most of its staff from the U.S. military. The Flying Tigers began to arrive in China in April 1941. The group first saw combat on 20 December 1941, 12 days after Pearl Harbor. It demonstrated innovative tactical victories within the news in the U.S., but was filled with little more than stories of defeat at the hands of the Japanese forces, and achieved such notable success in the lowest period of the war for both U.S. and Allied forces as to give hope to America that it might eventually defeat Japan. AVG pilots earned official credit and received combat bonuses for destroying 296 enemy aircraft while losing only 14 pilots in combat. The combat records of the AGV still exist, and researchers have found them credible. On July 4th, 1942, the AVG was disbanded and replaced by the 23rd Fighter Group of the United States Army Air Forces, which later absorbed into the U.S. 14th Air Force, with General Chanot as commander. The 23rd FG went on to achieve similar combat success while retaining the nose dart on the left over P-40s. And by the same name, you can watch and learn what they did through the movie Flying Tigers was John Wayne. And we move a little bit more into World War II on the Atlantic side with the British Eagle Squadron. Eagle squadrons were three fighter squadrons of the Royal Air Force, formed with volunteer pilots from the United States during the early days of World War II, circa 1940, prior to America's entry into the war in December 1941. With the United States still neutral, many Americans simply crossed the border and joined the Royal Canadian Air Force to learn to fly and fight. Many early recruits had originally gone to Europe to fight for Finland against the Soviet Union in the Winter War. Charles Sweeney, a wealthy businessman living in London, persuaded the British government to form an RAF squadron composed of Americans. His uncle, also named Charles Sweeney, had been working along similar lines, recruiting American pilots to fight in France. Sweeney's efforts were also coordinated in Canada by the World War I air ace Billy Bishop and the artist Clayton Knight, who formed the Clayton Knight Committee, which by the time the United States entered the war, the process had processed and approved 6,700 applications for Americans to join the RCAF and the RAF. Sweeney and his rich society contacts bore the cost over $100,000 of processing and sending men to the United Kingdom for training. Basic requirements for those interested in joining the Eagle Squadron were a high school diploma between 20 and 31 years of age, eyesight that was 20/40, correctable to 20/20, and 300 hours of certified flying times. These requirements, with the exception of flight time, were not as strict as those required for service in the United States Army Air Corps, which was the reason for some of the pilots joining the squadron. Most Eagle Squadron pilots did not have a college education or prior military experience. Once in Britain and having passed basic flight training, the new pilots were sent for advanced operational training to Operational Training Unit (OTU) for 2 to 4 weeks to learn to fly Miles Master Trainers, Hawker, Hurricanes, and Supermarine Spitfires. They were being ostensibly commissioned as RAF officers and posted in frontline RAF fighter squadrons. American pilots assessed to the Eagle Squadron never renounced their U.S. citizenship, and although they wore the uniform and held the rank title RAF officers, their dress and duty uniforms tunics were modified with Eagle Squadron patches and a white bald eagle flanked by the letters ES for Eagle Squadron. And you can keep reading about it, folks, on this Wikipedia article. Where do you see this in movies? You can see it at the beginning of the movie Pearl Harbor. So why do I bring up this topic of American volunteers? Because there are some here in the United States who are spewing Russian propaganda saying America should not have anything to do with this war in Ukraine. You should not be helping them to defend their homeland, to protect their people. And that Americans should leave Ukraine. You know how un-American that sounds. You know how that goes against everything in our American history, which they don't hardly teach anymore, which many in my day, early 2000s to 2007, weren't so interested in our history. Me, I couldn't get enough of it. Where the librarians, one related to me, it's like, okay, we gotta get this kid some books on World War II. And they did. They got some books on Korean War. I read those. I absorbed that information. I loved it. I still do. Who are these un-Americans I'm talking about? Donald Trump Jr., Donald Trump himself, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie, Rand Paul, uh, Paul Gosar of Arizona, a good number in the Senate, in the House, Tucker Carlson, probably Sean Hannity, all these big name talking heads who are abandoning our rich volunteer American history. And everyone who listens to them becomes more and more un-American. Yet none of them have signed up to the Foreign Service Office to declare they are foreign agents or assets of Russia when they spew Russian intelligence talking points, or when they show up in Russian intelligence memos by name. Yet, General Flynn went through hell because he forgot to register about his time working for a Turkish company. And yet these people are not touched, are not bothered like General Flynn. Like on a Twitter post, some idiot, another one, said, should America not be sending any more money and equipment to Ukraine? I was like, let me paint you a picture of what happened there might happen here. Imagine an enemy force bombs us in the middle of the night, bombs our capital cities in the middle of the night, sending in their best special forces units to capture and to kill our government leaders. They invade our towns and our cities, force the women, children, boys, men, babies into basements where they are tortured, where they go on Facebook Live and rape the women, the boys, the babies. And once they're done with that, they tie or tape their hands behind their back and execute them in basements or full of executed Ukrainians, where the Russians built mass graves and filled them with thousands of bodies, which are still being discovered to this day. Imagine that happening here. Then our friends, our allies, thinking, should we send help, send any type of military aid and equipment to help our friends to chase and go after the bastards who did this? And up comes some nosy talking head idiot saying, oh no, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. It wasn't the enemy we were thinking about that did it. It was them who did it to their own people. You know how insane that is? Not to do what is morally right and just when such atrocities happen. That these people want to turn their backs on their rich, beautiful American volunteer military history. That they don't want to do the right, moral, and just thing to help find and push the bastards out of Ukraine and send them to God for proper punishment. That is why, when, thanks be to God, the military was putting all that shot stuff into work, that's when a lot of people were leaving the military. And people were wondering where they're going to go. You know where they went with their talents and the training? Oh, yeah, they went to Ukraine to do the right thing. Hundreds of thousands of Americans did and are still over there doing the right thing, either in combat units and tank divisions, infantry divisions, reconnaissance, volunteer organizations. We have one friend who's in a tank unit. Then we have our guys who are the nonprofit volunteers who are also ex-military, helping and working for Crosses Zone. That is true Americanism. That is true America right there. Leaving the comfort of your homes, leaving your loved ones, your daughters, the comfort of our homes here to go be in the cold of the Siberian winters in Ukraine. The muck and the mud is so thick that it freezes and you have to use a blowtorch. You heat it up so you can get it off your legs, off your boots, dodging all sorts of incoming artillery rounds, missiles, rockets, bombs. They're raiding drones while doing the right thing and helping Ukrainians defend their homeland and bring humanitarian aid to those Ukrainians in occupied areas. And to all the Americans serving in Ukraine, fighting or as volunteers, doing humanitarian aid work, or supplying the troops, or doing both. We thank you, we honor you, and God bless you. And if you want to know more about crossesair.org, how to help or how to join, there's the badge in the show page. Click it and it'll take you right to the website. And please join up or help us in any way possible. Day is full.